Hey guys, and I am so excited to be with who I am with today, and that's Nathan Thompson. Nathan has been featured on a Netflix special called Behind the Curve. He has a huge Facebook group and following, official Flat Earth and Globe discussion. He has a YouTube channel, and his Instagram is The Globe is Flat. So welcome, and thank you for joining this hella controversial podcast, Nathan.
I love the topic or the title of your show, Hella Controversial, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I had to make it hella controversial because so that way people, when they listen to it, they just know that it's controversial and won't just rip me apart. So,
Good.
So can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into flat Earth?
Of course. I didn't want to be a flat earther. I never wanted to be a flat earther. But when I was young and they were teaching me about the heliocentric cosmology, I had a lot of Christians in my ear telling me that there's a God in heaven who loves me. And I was thinking, well, if I love someone, I don't put them billions of light years away in a chaotic universe of exploding stars and in a vacuum of space, and I just didn't make sense to me. So I rejected the idea there was a God that loved me for almost 10 years. And started reading scripture when everyone else went to college. And I found it super interesting, the prophecy that was in there and equidistant letter sequencing, numerology. I started realizing this whole thing was code and it was written from outside of our time domain. So I reluctantly became a Christian. I wasn't trying to be a Christian either. And I started studying applied neuroscience and epigenetics, steroidogenesis, which is basically how to endogenously produce steroids using the body and the brain. And one of the smartest people I'd ever met in my life, who'd been studying this as long as I'd been alive, and he literally wrote the book on it, he told me, Nate, you ever look into flat Earth? And I said, are you joking? You know, I heard about B.O.B. the rapper. He was on a Twitter tirade talking about how we live on a flat Earth. And I thought, it's just got to be some type of substance that the rappers are using to make them think they live on a flat Earth. And I completely dismissed it. But when Michael told me he'd been researching it, and for 7 months he'd been researching it and didn't tell me, one, I was kind of offended because I would have hoped he had told me sooner. But it is a very controversial topic. And when I asked him why he took so long to share it with me, he said, I had to know for sure. And I could admire that. But I didn't take that long to figure it out. It took me about a month to spend quite a bit of money on buying some Nikon equipment, doing my own observations, time lapses of the stars. I was doing moonlight tests, found out that moonlight's measurably cold. So when God said he made two lights in the sky, one to rule the day, one to rule the night, they've taught in mainstream science that the moon is a reflector of hot, pyrophosphorescent, drying sunlight. But what we find in nature is it has the complete opposite effect, which I think is where we get the yin and the yang symbol. So that is just a picture of the flat Earth with the sun and moon moving around polar center. So I'll see a lot of people sometimes, they have yin and yang tattoos, and I just have to point out, hey, you have a flat Earth tattoo on you. They usually reject that. But so, and then after doing all my own tests and observations, I'm getting on these groups in Facebook and realizing, wow, there's not anywhere to get good information. A lot of these groups were run by counterintelligence or just people that were there to mock and ridicule and push the narrative that flat Earth is ridiculous. And all agree it does sound ridiculous. And everyone's going to have that initial knee-jerk reaction like, oh my God, this is so dumb. I can't believe anyone would actually believe the Earth is flat. But when you start looking into NASA and the pictures we've been getting, not just of Earth, but of satellites and of the South Pole and of planets and stars, you're going to realize even the people who do the interviews and work for NASA will tell you that it's photoshopped, and it has to be because space is fake. They've been fake. It's been an entire show. They get $52 million a day, and then the news and the media and the schools all help perpetuate this lie because I don't know, 5 or 6 countries or companies run the entire banking system, the government, the politicians, and people who are doing news are all blackmailed. They're all in on it, and there's an agenda not just to hide the shape of the earth, but for a new world order that is coming to a town near you. And so I just think that this is a massive precursor to show, look, the world has been duped and most people don't even know where they live. And so, especially if you're a Christian, if you believe in a creator who made a heliocentric model, but a creator of a heliocentric model doesn't exist, then you believe in a false God. And I think that's kind of sad, because the God of the Bible made a flat and stationary earth. There's over 200 verses that support it. He talks about how it's on pillars, how it's on foundations, how it will never move, how it's immovable. And if you're the father of lies, and to you, God's word is heresy, well, then you're going to do everything you can to make sure nobody believes what God says and takes it literally.
Yeah, I agree. Wow. Well, there's my whole podcast, because you just said it all. That's perfect. No, okay. Well, I want you to explain like how the flat Earth works, because a lot of people, they're just like, oh, well, if there was a flat Earth, then I could just walk right off of it, And initially, when they hear, because a lot of my friends, and probably most of America maybe hasn't heard of it, and they all make jokes like that because they haven't looked into it or they don't know. So can you explain like how it works and what it looks like? And you said a little bit with the yin and yang, because a lot of people don't understand that. Would you explain that and the firmament?
Yep. So they've been making maps of the flat Earth for thousands of years. Every ancient culture has believed that the Earth is flat in the center of the universe. Mayans, Greeks, Phoenicians, Celts, the Nordics, and there's documentation of all of this. I have it. So if anybody would like to look into this, just email me, flatearthflyers@gmail.com. But how the flat Earth works is, obviously there is topography on the land, but once you get to the oceans, it levels out. So they call it sea level. The word level in the dictionary means free of bends, curves, or irregularities, and some synonyms are straight, plumb, flush, smooth, and flat. So basically, when someone says sea level, they're saying sea flat. And we see way too far. There's a book called The Greatest Lie on Earth by Edward Hendry, and he quotes the geographic range table by the U.S. Coast Guard, and that range table lists distances at sea level that you can see distant objects on the horizon. And now, the distances it lists would be impossible on a globe, because if we did live on a globe 24,901 miles around, there would be immeasurable convexity in the water. The horizon would be a drop tangent to your feet, and that drop would be in all directions, 360 degrees from you, especially on water. So the drop works out to 8 inches per mile squared, according to Pythagorean theorem and AutoCAD, but you convert 8 inches into feet, and you're looking at 0.666 feet per mile squared. So the alleged curvature at 10 miles is 66.6 feet, which anyone who reads their Bible knows that. No, it's an interesting number, but the fact that it's not there, the fact that it's not there and we can't find it is the part I find most interesting, because it could just be a coincidence. Oh my gosh, the Earth's radius equals, I mean, I'm not that big of a conspiracy theorist, but then you add into, they teach that the Earth is tilted, and if you look in the modern mainstream science books, it'll say 23.4 degrees or roughly 23.4 degrees. Now they're saying Earth wobbles. Sometimes it's 23.3, sometimes 23.5. But you take 90 degrees and you subtract 23.4, and you end up with 66.6 degrees. And you ask anyone how fast we orbit around the sun that believes in the globe model, they don't know. But if you Googled it, it's 66,600 miles an hour, which is over 80 times the speed of sound. So these people believe that the Earth's curving 666, it's tilted 666, and we're blasting around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour. And that's all stuff you can go verify on Google. I didn't make up these numbers. I'm just telling you what they're teaching in the mainstream textbooks. I don't think any of that stuff's true. I would say the curvature is 0 inches per mile squared. The Earth moves 0 miles per hour, and it's not tilted at all, because the idea people walk on a tilted reality is just bonkers. It's just sorcery and wizardry in its highest form, where they have convinced people there's no up and down. Sometimes you're walking on North America and sometimes you're in Australia. It's all relative. So do what you want, do what you want. It's all relative, so they create, even though space is very infinite, it creates a very finite way of thinking, which is, I'm going to be an atheist and I'm going to do whatever I want. And
I'm so small compared to this huge universe. There could be other beings everywhere else,
Exactly. Yeah. So on their model, it says, why would you matter? You're just a speck of dust in an infinite universe. And on our model, the real one, in reality, that anyone can go test, God's saying, I love you more than this whole world. I sent my son to die for you, and I want you to get saved. So they are polar opposites. They are diametrically opposed from the start.
Yeah, that's really good. I also, going back to like what the flat Earth looks like, the United Nations, isn't the United Nations logo still the flat Earth model, right?
Well, the United Nations logo is a depiction of an azimuthal equidistant projection, which the United States Geological Survey states they use the flat Earth map to calculate distances outward from the North Pole, but also to make maps of Antarctica and also to make maps of the stars in the sky, which, Hipparchus, Ptolemy, the Celts, the Mayans, they've all been doing this for thousands of years. They were so advanced in it, they were doing something called astroarchaeology, which is where they would build buildings and line them up to the sky. Now, to think we're on a ball blasting through space and all the stars are having parallax, some are moving away, some are moving towards us, while we move through the universe at 500 to 1.2 million miles an hour. Every day a glober has to believe we've traveled 20 to 35 million miles through the universe.
Yeah. And I've always wondered that, like seeing the same stars and same constellations.
Exactly.
And we're moving all the time, and they can predict it.
Exactly. Very well predicted. They've been doing celestial navigation using a stationary Polaris for thousands of years. And science will tell you, no, everything in the sky is moving around. There's something called parallax, where the distance between stars is getting greater or smaller, depending on where they are in the universe. And then you'll also hear some globe earthers just say, oh, well, no, all the stars just move with the Earth. That's why we have constellations. And you're like, well, Earth's just the center of the universe, just blasting through space as everything's just dragged with the Earth.
Oh, yeah.
So that stays
and the sun is supposed to be to them, right? The sun is supposed to be at least the center of us.
The center of our solar system, as it also careens through the Milky Way at 500,000 miles an hour. So, the sky, God told us the sky is a map and a clock. It's what we observe, but they're lying to us. And it's very observable. Those who have eyes to see will see it. Those who have eyes to ears to hear will hear it. End of story.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to hear, so I know that you have so much proof and everything and everything that you found, but I want to know, like, what has been the most profound proof that just made you, like, really confident and really just know for sure, but, just some types of proof that you found.
Of course. So
some facts that you can't deny.
I always joke that I'm the Pablo Escobar of flat earth flyers. So I've been mailing out stacks of flat earth flyers for years now, and I've got hundreds of people all over the world handing out these pamphlets, and they contain what I believe are the top 10 proofs that the Earth's not a spinning ball. And you said something interesting about the United Nations I didn't get to cover. Their map is actually divided into 33 sections. And if you read your Bible, 33 is the percentage of angels the devil pulled down from heaven. So it's a very occult number. So you'll notice 33 is the highest level of Freemasonry, which is another hella controversial topic.
And I've covered on Illuminati in the past, but I will get to more. I've just covered like how I learned about it and stuff, but I will cover that in future controversial podcasts. But yeah, go ahead. So.
They throw the 33 everywhere. It's one of their favorite numbers. So if you go and Google how many emails did Hillary Clinton have deleted, it was 33,000 emails. And so every day I'm looking at news things and they just throw it out there. they've got to put it in almost in one way, shape, or form. But CC is also 33. So when you see closed captioning CC on the TV, or you CC someone on an email, or you're riding a 125 CC motorcycle, or you go to the hospital and get a 500 CC shot of something, those are all 33s. And then MM is just 33 flipped 90 degrees. And so you've got M&M Candy, M&M the Rapper, Mickey Mouse. I mean, Disney has a 33 club where you can go at Disneyland and have drinks and food. And it's just right there in your face, the 33 club. And it's on the UN logo. It's the highest level of Freemasonry. And it's the percentage of angels the devil pulled down from heaven. Now, if you're woke, you know there are a secret group of people that worship the devil and are into all sorts of rituals and occult practices. But they also speak to each other through signs and symbols and numerology. And so it's right there in your face if you're looking for it. But if you're not looking for it, they'll get away with it all day. So you asked for top proofs the earth is flat. I'm going to start with water. If you look into hydrostatics, surface of water is always level and horizontal at rest. It actually creates a perfect mirror. So a specular reflection will show no light diffusion in the rays. It copies the image that is above it. And so if water was convex, there would be distortion. Same way when you go to a circus and they have those mirrors that are bent one way and make you look skinny or make you look fat, we would see distortion in the water if it was there, but it's not apparent at all whatsoever. I mean, a sunset, you can watch the sun as it sets. The line will go all the way to your toes, all the way to the horizon. Now that would not happen if the water was bending, and we would see that. So hydrostatics is the number one proof. Water's always seeking its level. So if they teach in school 70% of the earth is covered in water, well, 70% of the earth is definitely flat and level. I mean, of course, there's going to be waves and tides, but waves and tides are not earth curve. So yes, the water is moving around, but it's not conforming to a ball.
Yeah, so when people say, well, that's because of gravity, I know that's a theory as well, but get into that.
Well, you can't say water's flat and then someone say, well, that's because of gravity. Well, if gravity was real, then water would have to be curving. But we do not observe this. Water at rest is always level. Doesn't matter if you're looking at a bathtub, a swimming pool, a lake, or the oceans. They call it sea level for a reason. And the geographic range table states we can see way too far. So we've done tests standing on one shore of a lake, and at 17 miles, you can observe a laser from the other side of the lake on the shore. Now, there should be over 100 feet of curvature there, and we're all 6 feet tall. The laser's a few feet off the ground, and we're observing it from the other side of the lake. So this is being done all over the world. It's not just one lake that's flat. This is just a property of water. And all fluids, actually, if you look into how they make glass, everyone will agree, oh, the glass on that window is flat, or this mirror is flat. Well, how they make glass and mirrors flawlessly flat is they have to lay it on top of molten metal, and the molten glass floats like driftwood on a lake on top of the molten metal because it's less dense. But that's the only way they can make flat glass without bubbles, is by floating it on top of molten metals, because all liquids, not just water, at rest will level out. And so that's the one I want to spend the most time on. I think it is the best one, but I've got 99 more proofs memorized if you want me to go over all of them. Or I could just do the other 9 in the flyer. I could just give you a couple more. It's just, what do we have time for?
Probably just a couple more.
Cool.
Maybe, just a couple more of your favorite ones.
Well, another great one is the Earth is stationary. All real science proves that the Earth is stationary. They've been teaching what's called pseudoscience, which doesn't follow the scientific method. So if your experiments are not observable and repeatable, you are, by definition, a pseudoscientist. So the only people who feel Earth move are drunk. And I'm not saying that we should feel it on their model. They'll say, oh no, we shouldn't feel it because it's velocity, it's not acceleration. You don't feel velocity even though we're on a spinning ball orbiting around the sun. That's not linear. You don't feel linear velocity if you're moving at a constant rate, but you'll feel acceleration and deceleration. You'll feel turning or spinning every time. And so the fact that no one's ever felt Earth spin isn't the best proof, but all science, every test to prove the Earth has moved has failed. They were doing Michelson-Morley to prove Earth orbits the sun, failed. They did Airy's failure to prove the Earth was orbiting and moving, and it failed. They found that the stars were actually moving around the Earth. So I think another great proof is that there's no real science to confirm that we move 66,600 miles an hour around the sun, that we spin 1,000 miles an hour, that we are chasing the sun 1,000,000 miles an hour through the universe. That's just hocus pocus, booga booga nonsense that they teach in the mainstream, and people believe it. It's akin to the witch doctors, and they've got the entire community entranced to where anyone comes against these booga booga witch doctors, and you're a raving lunatic. That's how deep the mind control has gotten. And so if you point out something like, the horizon's always flat, and it rises to eye level as you increase in elevation. It doesn't drop below you. We see way too far. World record photo is 270 miles, and the mountain is about 10,000 feet tall. There should be 50,000 feet of earth curve in between you and that mountain on the world record photo. And then, like I said, moonlight is measurably cold. Anyone can test it. The sun is small and localized. So the idea that the sun is 1,000 times bigger than the earth is a total joke. The reason the sun and the moon appear the same size is because they actually are the same size. And so we have something called crepuscular rays. There's only one way to make crepuscular rays. You need a localized light source. Then you need some blockage, which in our instance would be the clouds. And then there needs to be particulates in the air for the rays to bounce off of so you can see the crepuscular rays. And so there's no other way to make it. If you move that light source 93 million miles away and make it bigger than the Earth, you don't get crepuscular rays. Anyone can Google crepuscular rays, but it's
if people probably don't know that term, but I know what you're talking about. When it comes through the clouds and you see it pointing to the left and to the right and straight down.
Exactly.
Right?
And some people will say, oh, that's just an illusion because look at how light goes through a keyhole. Well, if that were the case, then every hole in the clouds would have its own individual crepuscular ray, but they don't. All the rays are coming through the clouds and focusing above one local point. And then also, if you just look at daytime temperatures, I mean, when it's summer and it's high noon, the sun is obviously directly above us, but at sunrise and sunset, you can barely feel the heat from the sun. Now, if the sun's 93 million miles away and all we're doing is just spinning in a circle, so that would be causing day and night, well, then it would be relatively the same temperature in the morning and then in the evening as it is at high noon, but that's not what we observe. I mean, in the morning it could be 60, 70 degrees, and at high noon you're at 100 degrees, and you got to find some shade.
Wow, that's interesting.
And so not just that, but if the sun's moving around polar center like yin and yang, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning. They put it in all the music. So if that's what's going on, the northern areas would get more light and the southern areas would get less light. And this is what we observe, not just with the drastic temperature variations in the north and south, but they have totally different fauna and flora, which means plant and animal life. So in the north, you'll get trees and plants and vegetation, reindeer. And in the south, you get ice and penguins year round.
Yeah.
So they are not analogous. There's a reason there's an Antarctic treaty since 1961. The 60s was when they pretty much built the space program overnight, which can't even get to the moon anymore. So we allegedly went there, built the space program overnight, drove a dune buggy on the moon, had a phone call with the president, played golf, got everyone back safely, and haven't been able to do it for 50 years because
even though this is the most dramatic change in our technology, but we still can't do it.
It's incredible,
Yeah.
So
I just want to add about like the stars in the sky. Isn't there a point where you can film the stars just going in a circle around the Earth?
So if you check my YouTube channel, Nathan Thompson, I've done hundreds of videos. Not all of them are posted. I'd say I got about a dozen posted, but they do show. It's called Star Trails. And what you do is you need your tripod mounted and very stationary, because if you move your tripod at all, it totally disrupts the entire image of the star trails, which is an interesting point because everyone will tell you, oh, we're on a spinning ball, but you can't move your tripod and get star trails at all whatsoever. So what they show is all the stars are circling Polaris, except for, of course, the planets. The word planet means wandering star. So when people say planet Earth, that's an oxymoron. Earth is not a wandering star. Earth is the land underneath the firmament, and the firmament is what is containing all the sun, moon, and stars, and the wandering stars too. It talks more about the wandering stars in Enoch. I highly recommend any Christian who hasn't read Enoch, check it out. Enoch was Noah's father, and it says in the Bible that he was one of the only people in the Bible who walked with God and didn't die. He was called up. How cool is that? He got raptured in the Bible because he walked with God. And there's a lot of truth in his book. I think that's maybe one of the reasons that they took it from canon, is because they were going to push a heliocentric lie, or were already in the midst of pushing a heliocentric lie. And the book of Enoch was just too revealing for cosmology for them to be putting it in there. But that's just my speculation. I'm kind of spitballing there, but yeah. So
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I got a little sidetracked. Did I answer the question? What was the question?
Yeah, just we're still talking about just the proof and the facts and stuff.
Excellent.
So yeah, some of the little ones that I have found, I guess I don't know little, but are the one like the airplane. There was an airplane that flew from Taiwan to Los Angeles, and she was giving birth, or there was an emergency birth or whatever, and she landed in Alaska, right?
That is correct, and those are all kind of the surface proofs that people go, oh, that's interesting, I should look into this more. But the real nail in the coffin with air travel is that the Federal Airline Administration doesn't even train their pilots to fly on a ball. They use what's called a target generation facility. It's a flat Earth simulator that does not have a rotating Earth underneath, and it actually says a third thing that is very damning to the heliocentric globe lovers. It says that they don't account for gravity in the Federal Airline Administration software. So if these planes were being pulled down by a giant force on Earth, and the gravity was getting less and less as airplanes increased in altitude, I just find it interesting. They admit they're not accounting for it at all whatsoever, but they also don't account for a rotating Earth. They also don't account for any curvature at all whatsoever. So when an airplane reaches cruising altitude, they have leveled out and are going to stay on that flat and level path till they descend the airplane and come back to Earth. So, pilots aren't flying around a ball. There's no evidence. And if Earth did have a Coriolis effect, like they teach in mainstream science, that Earth moves under sniper bullets and this and that, well, then Earth would also move under helicopters and airplanes and hot air balloons and drones and insects and volcano smoke. But Earth doesn't move under any of these things. We do not observe this. So there's no drastic difference in journey times, east to west or west to east. If you take Charlotte to Los Angeles, that's relatively on the same latitude. It doesn't matter if you go east or west. It's 4.5 hours either way. So the Earth is not rotating under anything because the Earth does not rotate. That's just something people have been taught. That they've been taught to believe it. They've been taught to believe otherwise is a sign that you're a raving lunatic. Sorry, we got an Amber Alert here.
Oh, that's fine. So, what about what if the argument of the atmosphere is connected to the Earth?
Well, excellent, because that's not how fluid dynamics work. So, if you take a piece of paper or your cell phone and you move it back and forth laterally in front of you, all the air above your phone or the notebook is not also moving laterally back and forth. So the Earth wouldn't drag the atmosphere. That's also not even what mainstream science teaches. Mainstream science teaches that there's a Coriolis effect and that the Earth just moves slightly under the atmosphere. So that's not even what mainstream science teaches, but there's one major problem with that. If the atmosphere moves with the Earth, that would mean that as you increase in altitude, you're also increasing in velocity to maintain that constant position above the Earth.
Okay, yeah.
So that would mean every time a hot air balloon goes up or a helicopter takes off or an airplane goes up, that it's increasing in velocity just to maintain that constant rotation of the Earth. Now, what would cause an increase in velocity horizontally around the Earth? Now, you can't say gravity, because gravity doesn't pull things horizontally. Gravity doesn't pull air and cause it to accelerate. There's no evidence of that. And that's not even how fluid dynamics work. So people can believe whatever they want about the Earth. The Earth can be whatever shape you want it to be. But that doesn't make it true.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay, so next question. Why would you say you're so passionate about this subject and you really want to get it out there and want people to know about it?
That's a really good question. I am so passionate about it. I feel called to share and educate people about Earth. And one of the reasons is Jesus said, if you don't understand the earthly things, how are you going to understand the heavenly things? And before Flat Earth, I spent 10 years debating with atheists about how the government doesn't love them, and 9/11 was an inside job, and evolution isn't real. You guys are not shape-shifting pond fish. And when I found out about Flat Earth, I just thought, wow, this is such a great argument for the Creator, because it says in the Bible, if you look at creation, it reveals His qualities. So the more we study creation, the more we look at it, the more we're going to know about God. But if we just blindly believe He put us on a spinning tilted ball on Earth because the government has billions of dollars and puts satellites into space, well, then you'll just be deceived.
Yeah.
So I don't want my friends and family to be deceived. So the same way Paul Revere went on his midnight ride and wanted to warn everyone the British are coming, I want to warn everyone that the curvature never got here. It's always been flat, and we just got duped by a new world order, and all the world government is working together to lie about where we live, and they're lying to little kids. The Bible says it's better to hang a millstone around your neck and jump in a lake than to lie to children and mislead them. And so, most of the people propagating this lie aren't intentionally doing it. Most of them are just scientists getting grants and teachers teaching the curriculum, but that doesn't make it right. And that doesn't make it okay. And once you hear that that's not true, you have the responsibility to test all things. The Bible says, test all things, hold fast to that which is true. And, even if you're not a Christian, do your own experiments because they're lying to you. And there's nothing more freeing and liberating than knowing where you live, because ignorance, and freedom cannot coexist.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love how you went into it and did all of your own experiments and all of that and sought the truth.
Yeah, well, I knew it was such a hella controversial topic. I can't come at all I was a moderately popular guy in Orange County, California. I was very social, very outgoing, very well connected. Everybody knew me. I was always the life of the party, and so
all right.
When I tried to come into this, I couldn't say, hey guys, I watched some videos on YouTube and it's flat. I had to say, dude, I went out there and I did my own test.
Yeah.
And I think that gives you a lot more conviction, a lot more confidence than just, oh, I saw some videos on YouTube and we can see too far. That doesn't work too well, just so you know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really nice. Like, you sound really intelligent, and that how you present yourself really helps as well, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so after you told me about Behind the Curve on Netflix, I watched it last night. And the ending was a little weird, and I think they were trying. It wasn't coming from like a flat Earth perspective. Whoever created it, would you agree with that?
Oh, they're definitely not flat earthers.
Yeah,
definitely not.
And so the ending with the laser and how that ended. Has there been any laser? Or you were talking about that already over the lakes and stuff.
Of course.
There has been proven ones.
Yes, so that was edited by globe earthers who had an agenda. If they wouldn't give Jaron the footage, Jaron was actually going to hire a videographer to come record that test. And they said, oh, well, we're going to record it. We'll give you all the footage. And he said, great. I don't have to hire someone else to do it. They never gave Jaron that footage because they edited the crap out of it. And Jaron actually had technical difficulties where he left the light on for too long. The light got hot. The light fused to whatever they were using. And it made it so it couldn't work. So they weren't using the laser. They ended up using a flashlight. So when he said, that's interesting, we couldn't see the flashlight. Well, duh, it's not a laser. I mean, a flashlight's not going to penetrate the atmosphere the same way the central intense axis of a laser would. So that's why we use lasers in these long distance observations. But I mean, they recorded him and he was just trying to see if they could do it with the flashlight because the laser wasn't working. But none of that was portrayed in the film. Those people said all they were doing was a look at the community, and it ended up being a total hit piece. But I mean, the Bible says what the devil intends for bad, God uses for good. And so thousands of people watched that documentary and said, wait, people actually believe the earth is flat? Wait, what? They're actually serious? And
and they start out thinking it's crazy, but then once they look into it, their mind, and that's the same thing. That's what I did.
Same here. I agree.
Yeah. Well, great. I'm glad you could present your side of that piece, because I watched it last night. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible. But okay, so we have a couple of listener questions that came in. We only have about 3. So the first one, I think we already covered it, but we might have not covered the last part of it. And so she said, how do you explain stars and constellations? I think we covered that, but she also said satellites. So can you talk about what satellites are?
Of course. I'm so glad she asked about satellites, because that's a question we get all the time. Now, if you Google pictures of satellites in space, you're going to find hundreds of cartoons. Obviously fake cartoons. So there are no real satellites, because satellites on the globe model wouldn't be able to penetrate the thermosphere. The thermosphere is allegedly 4,000 degrees, and metals in the satellites are titanium, aluminum, and they use gold and a couple other things. But all those metals have a melting temperature of under 2,000 degrees. So they would have to teleport these satellites outside through the thermosphere, which is not possible. Also, satellites is just more layered propaganda, because you have to assume things fall in a circle and that gravitational orbits are real. And there is no scientific evidence of gravity or gravitational orbits at all whatsoever. So gravity cannot make things collide and stick together, but also make things orbit around in a circle at the same time. It either causes things to be pulled together or causes objects to orbit around it in a circle. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And so satellites, the reason that there's no real pictures is because they're not real. But what are they really doing? Well, they're using, since the 50s, there's been what's called the Corona program. It's been top secret, but it's been declassified because the Freedom of Information Act. And it talks about how they've been launching high altitude balloons. They've modified Air Force cargo planes so that they have hooks on the end, so that when the balloons pop, there's a parachute. They have a certain amount of time they can pick it up. So all the communication has been done for almost 100 years now with just balloons and cell phone towers. And what they're doing now is they're laying submarine fiber optic communication cables all over the world. That's actually how they transmit 98% of the data all around the Earth. So the fiber optic cables moves information almost instantaneously. And then once you get to a certain area, they can be using a combination of towers and balloons. But if you can do a balloon for $50,000 or $80,000, it makes absolutely no sense to send a satellite for $5 million into space, and to never be able to work on it if it gets broken, to never be able to retrieve it. Just not to mention, if satellites are real, what are they doing during the meteor showers? Just bringing all the satellites down? You have to believe, if we're on a rock in space, that meteor showers are Earth getting pelted by space debris. Now, if we're moving 1.5 million miles an hour through the universe and 66,000 miles an hour around the sun, and you think after these guys have their morning coffee, they calculate all of that, including space debris, for that these satellites that go up into Earth orbit. I mean, I
Yeah.
would have to say, I honestly just admire your faith in the government. That is just incredible amount of faith and blind religious fanaticism that I honestly admire. It's incredible that you could believe that much mumbo jumbo from the government.
Yeah, well, it's easy when they control literally every platform that we're watching, that we're listening to, so. But yeah, that was an interesting name. It's the Corona program or whatever.
Yes, the Corona program. So satellites are a combination. Yeah. The Corona program's been around since the 50s, and it's very interesting. I have an interview on my channel, on my YouTube channel, where the guy says, I was in the Corona program, we had top secret clearance, and they had a captain who approached the vessel and said, hey, I want to come on board and see your paperwork. And they said, hey, you're not coming on here, because they had the gondola in the back of the plane, and they were just refueling at this Air Force base. And he goes, no, I'm going to come aboard. And they actually cocked the gun in the plane and said, no, sir, you're not coming on board this plane. And he goes, hey, all right, guys, calm down. I just need to see your paperwork. Bring it down whenever you can. But these people who were lower ranking than the captain were ready to kill a captain in their own team just to hide this gondola that was in the back of the airplane. Now, this was declassified in a federal Freedom of Information Act interview that's on my channel. But it's very interesting what's been going on. So, yeah, no satellites, all communication, guys, just to sum it up, is ground-based, or they're using balloons. It's ground-based towers, fiber optic submarine communication cables, and they also have temporary high-altitude balloons, and then they also have modified U-2 spy planes that could be transmitting data. I mean, there's just tons of ways they could be doing it other than a belief that cartoon metal boxes are falling in a circle around the Earth.
Okay, that's great. I love this one. How you summed it up. Okay, the next question is, how do you explain a lunar eclipse, like when the Earth gets in front of the sun and makes a shadow, or like a blood moon? And why, she also asked, why isn't the shadow flat?
Yeah, of course. So, it's not a shadow. And so I talked about earlier how the moon and the sun are their own lights, but the number one problem that globe earthers have with the lunar eclipse is that sometimes it happens while the sun is still above head to the observer, above the horizon. So you have a lunar eclipse on one side of the sky and the sun on the other side of the sky. Now, Earth could not be intercepting the sunlight on their model if the sun and moon are both visible to the same observer. So, and shadows are black. The only black part of an eclipse is the penumbra, and then it reaches the umbra, which is bright red, bright purple, has a glowing effect. It almost looks like someone heated up copper to the point where it's glowing red. Now, shadows are never glowing red. So once you get it through your mind that the moon is not reflecting sunlight, you don't ask questions like, oh, what happens when a lunar eclipse where the Earth's shadow is causing the sunlight from the moon to be blocked? The moon's not a reflector of sunlight. So something else is causing it. Something else is up there. Ancient civilizations have been studying invisible moons in the sky for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They go back, some of you might have heard of something called Rahu and Ketu, which are alleged invisible moons in the sky that can cause the eclipses and stuff. So they've been predicting the eclipses on a flat Earth I have the predictions. They're in a book called Zetetic Astronomy by Samuel Rowbotham, which was written back in the 1800s. So they've known how to predict all this stuff on a flat Earth. And on a globe model, they don't even have an equation for 3 bodies of mass. So it's just m1 plus m2 divided by the distance squared. So to think that anyone on a globe model is putting in gravity of the moon, gravity of the sun, gravity of the Earth, gravity of Jupiter, gravity of Saturn, and predicting where we're going to be in this infinite vacuum of space to model eclipses, it's just more blind religious fanaticism and faith in the government. So they've hijacked all the research that the astronomers have been doing for thousands of years and told you, look, it works on a globe. No, it doesn't. Because We don't live on a globe, and that's all research that flat earthers did and have been doing for thousands of years. So it's no,
Yeah.
back the Mayans were doing lots of research on eclipses and stuff, and none of the Mayans believed we live on a globe. They were predicting eclipses, and they had star charts and maps and could time out,
Oh wow.
how
Yeah.
when and where all this stuff was going to happen, and also I've covered how shadows are black and not glowing red. But you look at a solar eclipse, which is allegedly where the moon intercepts between the sun and the earth, and the shadow from the solar eclipse is 70 miles wide. Now, that would be analogous to a man walking in front of a wall, and there's a light shining on the man, but his shadow is the size of an action figure or G.I. Joe.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you wouldn't get a 70-mile wide shadow from a moon that's 1/6 the size of the Earth.
Oh yeah.
So something's
Right.
going on there, and I'm not a know-it-all, but I know what we can observe and what we can test. And what we can observe and test is that the moon's not a reflector of sunlight. That's the Earth intercepting the sun and moon is not what's causing lunar eclipses, because sometimes they happen during the daytime. So we need to look for other reasons as to why that's happening. It's not because we live on a globe.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, I am a know-it-all, but I know nothing compared to what you know. So, okay, the last question, and I was on a little confused because I don't know all the science. He said, "What do you think about the curvature of fresh water?" Because the flat earth, we don't believe in the curvature. Have you heard of with fresh water? Is it different? Or
Why would fresh water be doing something different than salt water?
I don't know. So yeah. So you've proven that there hasn't been a curvature in any of the waters that you have looked at.
Yeah, no, it's a natural property of water that water at rest seeks or will find its level and maintain a horizontal line to its container. Now, balls are not containers, but cups, bowls, those are all containers. And if you actually research Antarctica, it's got the highest average land elevation for any continent. So it just makes sense that that's what would be containing everything. It's got the highest average elevation out of any landmass.
Okay, well that goes into the next question that the same person said. It might come off a little snarky, but also he asked if you would be willing to trek through Antarctica to prove your point.
Okay, so trekking through Antarctica just proves you can trek through Antarctica. Okay, it does not prove that the Earth curves. It does not prove that the Earth moves. It does not prove that we move through space. So this is what happens when all your life you've been trained to believe fake science. You become scientifically illiterate. So you think science is putting on boots and walking across Antarctica. That's not what science is. That's called taking a hike, bud.
Okay, so you wouldn't, but because the flat Earth is the Antarctica is the wall. So
yeah, what he's saying is, could you traverse it? Well, I mean, there's been 5 or 6 people that claim to have traversed it. One of them was actually a known con artist, which I thought was kind of interesting when I did the research. I can't remember his name at the moment, but I mean, if you want to believe that, just take a look sometime at airplane travel. I mean, nobody's flying over Antarctica. They tell you that you can't fly over Antarctica. It's too cold. It'll ruin your plane. You'll crash. So, it's just, if he thinks it can be done, go do it.
Yeah. I mean, my thought was, well, I wouldn't trek through it. I would just fly over it. But people don't fly over it, or they're not allowed to, even.
Exactly. Right? Yes, it's a no-fly zone. So this, not to mention, there's a treaty that restricts individual travel. So if you think you're just going to load up the minivan, drive to Antarctica, and walk across it, dude, you're in for a rude awakening, bud. Rude awakening. But also, we don't need to travel to Antarctica to realize the Earth doesn't have curve anywhere. So remember when I said earlier that the ball Earth would drop tangent to your feet in all directions, you don't need to travel anywhere to test for curvature because it should be dropping to the left of you, to the right of you, in front of you, and behind you. In all directions. So I always say, test Earth right where you're at. Most major cities are near water so that they could have some form of travel and also irrigation back in the day when they needed that. So most cities are built near water. Just go out to a large body of water. We see way too far. So once you do your own test, you guys, then you can be a knower. You don't need to believe anything. Nobody needs to believe anything about the shape of the Earth. We walk around on it all day long. It doesn't need to be a belief.
Yeah. And we're all human. Like I've mentioned this probably on most of my podcasts, but we're all human, but we think that the government knows it all and they are like superhuman or something and we can't do the research that they're doing. It's funny how people think like
you're right. They're all just people just like us. They wake up, put their pants on one leg at a time. They're not special. Some
worship God, some worship the devil. So we want to be on the good side.
True, and none of them walk on water.
Yeah, amen. Okay, so my last question is what I ask all my podcasters, and especially would like to ask you because I think that you know about a lot of conspiracies probably, or what they call conspiracies. And I pretty much believe, or I'm on the same track of what you've been talking about. But what is the craziest, or maybe not crazy, but just a conspiracy that you've heard that you would never believe?
Well, there's a couple of them. Video games and television cause brain damage. Most people don't know that. That's why people are suffering from Alzheimer's, dementia. Number one cause of disability is stroke. Men over 50.
Well, that would be a conspiracy that you do believe. Right?
Yes, I do believe.
So what one would you not, like the craziest or like...
Oh, all right. So the craziest conspiracy I'll never believe in is that all the government is reptiles and that reptiles actually run the Earth.
That's my answer. The reptilians, yeah.
Oh, did we just become best friends?
Yeah. The reptilians and aliens, because if you believe flat Earth, there's no aliens. So.
One interesting, the other one I was going to say that I believed in was the jet fuel hoax. Have you looked into this?
Are you talking about chemtrails?
Not at all. So,
tell me.
Airplanes don't use jet fuel to fly.
Oh, interesting.
So, think about those wings, right? How thin they are, and then also how they're bouncing up and down the entire flight. Do you know where they say they store the gasoline?
Where?
In the wings.
Oh, interesting.
So if you look at a cut up plane, a sideways, where you cut the plane in half and peel it apart, the inside of the plane is just luggage and people. The bottom half's luggage, the top half's people. They admit in their schematics that the fuel tankers are in the wings, but the Airbus is allegedly carrying 200,000 gallons. So you're telling me 10 oil tankers, 10 gasoline trucks filled up the wings of an Airbus? I mean, that it's carrying 9 swimming pools on each side of the plane?
Okay, so what about filling up with gas, though? Like, my dad's a pilot, so he flies little planes.
Yeah, so the little ones, I'm talking about commercial jet airliners. The little prop planes, the little puddle jumpers, those ones do use gasoline, but the turbine jets, those are free energy. They create a vacuum in front of the engine and literally pull the plane through the air. It's not pushing itself through the air.
Okay, interesting.
So they've been hiding all kinds of technology, research the Hutchinson's effect, research the Searle effect generator, research zero-point energy, research piezoelectric energy harvesters, but airplane and F1 cars, the fuel is a hoax. F1 cars, those really fast race cars, like zoom, 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 those are also using the same technology. They do not have 55-gallon tanks for gasoline in those race cars. They're using compressed air to generate the power, and they're hiding it from the masses so that we can all go buy gasoline at the pump tomorrow.
Oh, interesting. Well, that is hella controversial.
That is. You're right.
Yeah, so I might have to study up on that.
Cool. Well, I can send you some.
Awesome.
I can send you some great videos on that. And remember, guys, you can find me on YouTube, Nathan Thompson, Instagram. The Globe is Flat. If anyone has any question or wants to bring me on their podcast, the name's Nathan Thompson, and an email's flatearthflyers@gmail.com. If you made it this far, really appreciate you listening. Make sure you support Hella Controversial and her podcast and what she's doing, because if you listen, you should support what you like.
Thank you. And it's Nathan with an A-N.
Nathan.
A-N.
Yep.
Instead of E-N, which, okay. Okay, well, thank you so much. This was so much fun, and I loved everything you were talking about, and maybe in the future I can maybe have you on again.
Excellent.
Or we can make fun of reptilians.
That sounds great. I'd love to do a Q&A sometime. I'm also going to save your number anytime I'm in Bend, Oregon. Maybe we can go out for a smoothie or something and hang out. So.
Yes, please do. Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
God bless you.
All right, you too.
Take care.